Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, Spin Driving School. This is going to be a longer video. This is a road that I have never driven before myself. It's from Princeton back to Eastgate Community, which is about a 30 to a 40-minute drive, and some windy roads, steep, downhill, uphill, etc., etc. So right now we're just making our way through downtown Princeton. I forget what the population is. I think it's like around 8,000 or so. It's a pretty small city, very lovely. If you're into small cities and kind of old school style cities, rustic cities, whatever you want to call them, cities with some history. There's mining history in this town, and it's a nice drive. So it's in this nice valley. I strongly encourage everyone to travel and go see the beautiful Canada. There's a lot of cool spots, specifically in British Columbia. So, and like I said, it's a fun drive, especially if you like to drive. You put on some tunes and you're cruising. But this is still the downtown portion. I mean, this is pretty much it, just one street. Then after this bridge, we're going to be merging onto Highway 3, I believe it is. So essentially this is, the Okanagan area, some people would say, or close to it at least. We're, I think, roughly around 2.5-3 hours from Osoyoos here. This is also a road a lot of people don't take because it is quite difficult at times to drive, especially at nighttime or in bad conditions. Even then, by nature, it's a very difficult road to drive. Could be intimidating and scary. Maybe not very difficult, but it's not a straightforward highway. The speed limit is 100 kilometers an hour, though it does vary and it drops at times. There's construction zones and some dangerous curves which you have to slow down. Right now, if you notice, the speed limit is at 60. But it's it can be very intimidating. There are a lot of accidents that happen here, especially in bad weather and wintertime. You do have to be well experienced and cautious. If you can't keep up with the flow of traffic, keep to the right. I'm gonna pass this truck. I want this truck to be behind me. I'm not gonna drive in his blind spot. Clearly he's going to be slower than me. I'm gonna move over to the right. Yeah, right now we're still essentially in the 60 zone. There is going to be some construction coming up, so I will point out the changes in speed limit and different things as we go along. So bear with me, but here we have a speed reduction to 50. There is a construction zone coming up, so you're looking for the signs to tell you to which lane you're moving over, which lane you're losing, essentially. And now we are slowing down to the construction speed limit, if there is one posted. Or perhaps even ahead of that. Just, as always, be observant, look at the signs, and go with that. So now we're stopping. Looks like there's going to be one lane traffic. So in these situations, this is a construction zone traffic light. And I've seen those. I've driven not this particular section of the highway, but this highway in general Highway 3 multiple times. So I've seen these weird looking traffic lights. They're kind of, I don't want to call them makeshift, but you know, they're essentially running on a generator, and a lot of times they're switched. Maybe not a lot of times, but sometimes they're switched by people, sometimes they are automatic. Though obviously now they could be powered by solar and various other ways. So now we can resume our speeds, and we're looking for speed limit signs. So now we're back to 80, and essentially the speed limit will rise up to 100. So there's also a lot of single lane highway sections throughout this freeway. So a lot of times you will be losing lanes and gaining lanes, you know, for passing and whatnot. And if you get stuck behind someone who's driving slow, especially trucks and a lot of campers and, you know, people traveling, it's a very common travel route. Like I said, it's not the favorite for most people. Most people, I would say, would take the Coquihalla if they're traveling in that direction, let's say. But I find this drive more fun, and that's that. So yeah, we're just cruising along here, giving cars some space. I will also point out some mistakes that I will make later on. Not the best choices. And in this case, in this situation, at this moment, this highway is fairly clear. I also prefer to drive, you know, earlier in the mornings or afternoons, where traffic usually is a little bit better. There you go. So steep winding road, no stopping. I think that's pretty much self-explanatory. There's a speed limit of 100. And as you notice, at this moment, it is 2-lane traffic in both directions. There's a lot of rockfall signs, again, curves, just anything that you would expect in curvy mountainous environment. And on top of that, quite a few construction zones. This highway is constantly being worked on and fixed and improved and you know, updated, upgraded. So there's constantly work on it, and cities are expanding. So highways need to be adapted to that, and that can create a lot of construction, which can be annoying, and it sucks, but when you live in Vancouver at this point, I think we should all be used to it, because it feels like, at least for the last 4 or 5 years, we've had construction just literally everywhere, and it's gotten overwhelmingly, it has increased overwhelmingly, I should say. And I know this is a little bit off topic. There's a speed limit, 100. And right now I'm doing around 110. You know, that's kind of the average speed limit at this moment. Just taking it easy. Usually I like to drive, you know, 120-ish or so. But like I said, this is my first time driving this particular highway, or this particular section. It's about, I would say, maybe 50 kilometers or so distance that I'm driving. So yeah, I'm just taking it easy, trying to map out the road if I ever do take this road next time. And yes, you can definitely remember these things. I mean, if you drive certain roads for long periods of time, you can definitely have some sort of a mental map, like a bird, of, you know, certain situations and changes in the road, and things like curves, and especially sharp curves. police, they are very frequent on this highway. So there's the merging arrow. So we've lost a lane and now we're in the single lane traffic. Double yellow line, which means no passing. And the opposing traffic is 2-lane traffic. And as I've said before, in these highways, this interchanges back and forth constantly. So no tailgating, give yourself space. Always react and drive accordingly to the conditions at hand. The road conditions are one of the most important things, other than the skills of the driver. The speed limit coming up will be reducing to 80 and then maybe furthermore. For now, it's 80. And again, these things can occur at any time, at any moment, and for various reasons. Generally, it's either going to be because of change in topography and, possibly elevation, and then some cornering. Maybe someone's keeping count of how many times I'm going to say cornering in this video, or corners. And then the other thing usually is going to be a construction zone. It could be an incident, a police incident. Those signs will not be, maybe posted on the side of the road like that. Right, so I would argue in this case, we went down in elevation a little bit. We have some sharp corners, and that's why that speed limit is reduced and enforced at 80, right? So that is not a recommended speed limit as it's on a white sign or a white background. Where this sign right there, the 60, around these curves and corners, is a advisory speed limit sign. Recommendation, if you will. So it doesn't mean that you have to go 60. If you're comfortable with the speed, if you can handle the vehicle at speed that you have chosen, then that's that. That essentially it is what it what it means in the essence. I think that might have came out wrong, but hopefully you guys get what I'm saying. We got some brakes. I'll be counting down some brake lights in this video as well, as some people, I guess they think that they always have to use their brakes to control or maintain the speed of the vehicle, and that is just not true, especially when you're driving on the highway and you don't have a lot of situations where you need to be slowing down or stopping unless they do present themselves. I'm not saying don't use your brakes. I'm not saying don't use your brakes when it's necessary or when you need to or when you have to or if you panic. But if you're a well-seasoned driver, you should be able to maintain the speed of the car without using the brakes as much as possible for various reasons. There's some lane splitting coming up in 3 kilometers, right? So we'll have essentially a passing lane, if you want to call it that. That is what it's called. Coming up. But so if you are a well-seasoned driver and you know your vehicle really well, if you get a rental, and I get it in some situations, let other pass, keep to the right. So if you're driving slow, keep to the right. But yeah, in certain situations, I understand why people do use their brakes. However, it's kind of annoying, and it should be something that you can lose very quickly. Or stop doing, or try not to do, or practice the habit of not doing. Okay, you just let the car coast. You can decelerate, especially when you're going uphill or downhill. You can use the accelerator in these situations. Even in an automatic car, you can use your gears to up and downshift. Obviously, if you have a manual transmission, which is what I'm driving right now, that's a lot easier to do, to downshift and to control your speed without the use of brakes, because I'm using my gears for up and downshifting, depending if it's up or downhill, depending on the elevation. I'm not saying that you have to do that in the automatic. I do that in my Toyota Corolla when I'm doing lessons all the time. People think that it messes up the transmission. If you know what you're doing and you know how to do it, it does not. I'm going to be passing this truck because he's driving slow. Anyways, try not to use your brakes as much as possible. If you don't have to. I'm just gonna put that out there because some people will listen to this and say, Sebastian said don't use your brakes. That's not what I'm saying. Now, see, we're losing the right lane, or the other vehicles are rather. So now I should have anticipated that, and I should have, well, I mean, I can always get behind them, which is what I'm gonna do now. But initially I wanted to be the first car, and I guess I wanted to go a little bit faster at that time. But poor choices were made, so. I was probably distracted by birds or something stupid like that. So anyways, so that just happened. So I'm still behind these vehicles. And that's fine. Maybe we'll use the next passing lane, which is coming up. So there we go. We got a nice split here. And now we have a passing lane. So we can potentially pass any slower moving vehicles if we want to. If not, keep to the right, drive the speed limit or a little bit under. Now, at this point, we're both doing around almost 120, okay? I'm staying a little bit behind this vehicle. Initially, I thought maybe about passing it, but I kind of had an idea that I'll be making a video about this, so I'm not necessarily driving in this lady's blind spot, if you will, because I'm still far enough behind so she can see me in her mirrors. And obviously, if you shoulder check, you should be able to see me. But we're just cruising along. Okay, like it's, 120 is a nice, healthy speed limit. In my opinion, I know I'm speeding. I'm going 20 kilometers and 80 is coming up here, so we'll be slowing down. I was doing, 20 kilometers over the speed limit, so I understand that. There are risks and consequences that come with those choices, okay? And I've paid for those choices. And I've dealt with the consequences. I get it. Back to a single lane, and now it's single lane on both sides. Again, double yellow line, which means no passing. So next passing lane in 10 kilometers, don't be passing people on a double yellow line. That's just dumb. And this is also another reason why there are more accidents on roads like this than, let's say, other highways, because a lot of people are just not being respectful. And there's the brake lights. We'll be counting down some brake light checks. That's probably not the right way to say it, but how many times is this person going to brake? In my opinion, for no reason. I get it, we're going downhill. I am driving manual, so I can definitely control the speed of the car better than in an automatic. I get that, you're going to be using your brakes. But if you already have good speed, you shouldn't be using your brakes too often. We're back to this conversation again. And ideally, if you're going to be using your brakes, you should be braking before the turn, so that when you're going into the turn and actually turning, you're using the momentum of the vehicle. And ideally, not to repeat myself, number 4, you should be actually accelerating lightly into the turn so that the drag force is increased. So that actually gives you more pull and thus more control. It does depend on the situation. So if you accelerate too much, sometimes that will cause some trouble, and especially if you have a rear wheel drive vehicle, that could be detrimental. If you have a four-wheel drive, that's probably going to be the best case scenario. If you saw earlier, that person was also braking uphill, which when you're braking uphill, that tells me that you are probably either just not a good driver, or you haven't been driving a lot. Maybe you just don't have a lot of experience driving on these sort of roads. But maybe you're just not being observant and reading the road right. It could be other factors, you know. Maybe I shouldn't jump to conclusions so quickly, but it just feels that way. So if you notice, the topography, the scenery is quite breathtaking and beautiful. It's a nice, beautiful day. And a lot of turns and corners at lower speeds, right? We have a lot of these recommended speed limits. 40, 50, 60 around these corners, 70 to 80 in some cases. So the general speed limit, it is 100 kilometers on this road, and then it goes, anywhere from 40 up to 100, depending on where you are and what kind of road you're dealing with. Now downhill, 80. Nice open road. So now I'm back to 115, 120 here. Got more brakes. Going downhill in this case, so it could be justified, sure. But why are you braking? Are you braking because you're scared? Are you going actually too fast and you're trying to reduce your speed for the turn? Or maybe you just don't know how to do a corner at the right speed, or a desired speed, or the speed that you are comfortable with. But if you're going to accelerate downhill and then you have a curve coming up, that should tell you something. You shouldn't have accelerated downhill. Just use the momentum and let the car coast. That way you will have more control and you will feel safer and more comfortable driving the vehicle. It is that simple, folks. With some practice, of course. Back to a single lane, double yellow line. So if you've noticed, there's a lot of double yellow lines in the middle, which again means no passing. Back to 2 lanes. If you've been paying attention, you probably realize that there's a lot more traffic going the opposite direction. So a lot of people traveling out of Vancouver, towards the Okanagan. I'm essentially driving west, so towards Vancouver in that direction. So traffic going my way is very smooth. I haven't had anyone pass me. I think we've passed a few vehicles only earlier. If you notice also, the quality of the highway changes. This is why I said earlier there's quite a bit of construction on this highway, because it constantly needs to be upgraded and updated. A lot of times they close the lanes in both directions to, improve the road and the asphalt. So now I'm going to be passing this vehicle. At least those are my intentions. The speed limit is back to 100. And see, again, very similar mistake from earlier where now that person maybe necessarily didn't have to use the brakes in this case to let me in because I was pretty confident that, anyways, maybe that's a silly point, but nonetheless, that was not the best passing situation. I should have done that earlier or accelerated more. I just didn't really know how long that lane was. And some more curves. And you see again, a lot of traffic coming my way. And now we're behind another vehicle. And a lot of times you can tell people who don't drive this road have a tendency to, drive that way. And sometimes people will literally slow down to the recommended speed limit, whether because they think that's the speed limit they have to follow, or they are just not comfortable with the speed that they have chosen. And I get it, it's not the nicest thing to be counting how many times people brake. It was just a fun game I was playing with myself, but I truly just don't understand it. I don't get it, why it has to happen so often, so many times. And that's definitely more than 5. So math was never my strength. Over the line. Right, so someone driving like that just tells me that they're probably not experienced when they're taking corners like that. Those are sloppy corners, and there's really no need for that, especially when this person is slowing down significantly before these corners. So they are going at the recommended speed limit, and you can take these corners, some of them you can do at 100. I'm not saying that you should, or you're supposed to, or you have to. I'm just saying you can, and that is the maximum speed limit in most sections of this highway. Right, so, and this person is using a lot of brakes in terrible moments and situations, right? In the middle of turning, in the middle of cornering, right? Again, here if you want to slow down a little bit, but at this point, like, you're still sitting on your brakes while you're going into the turn, and you're not really sticking to the lane very nicely, properly. Right, you kind of going, you're swerving and swaying all over the road. You don't have to be perfectly in the center. In some situations, it is actually good to take your corners, a little bit inward or onward or outward. Sure, yep. That definitely works. Especially tight corners, yeah. I've definitely driven where I've driven over the line, especially if I did something that I wasn't expecting to face, sure. 70-kilometer speed limit, so that's what I was saying earlier. That's one of those construction zone signs, usually. If you see it's just sitting on either on a cone or some sort of a tripod or quadrupod. That sounds like a freaking dinosaur or something. So we have a construction zone coming up, potentially. Well, we do. And thus the speed limit is being reduced. So be respectful. And in construction zones, slow down to the speed limit or even slower, okay? Human lives are far important than your inclination to drive fast. There are plenty of time and space to drive fast. just look at that view, folks. Mountains all around. It is quite splendid. This is quite possibly another situation, if I remember correctly, where we'll be going down to a single lane of traffic. So I think there was one of those, you know, I don't want to say makeshift, but one of those intersections, construction intersection. Maybe there's a better name for it. I'll have to look that up. If someone knows, maybe leave a comment if there's a proper name for that. Maybe it's just a foldable intersection. Hey, can I get one of those foldable intersections? So we're just hanging out. Crank up the tunes or whatever. Roll your window down and enjoy the sounds of nature. I've been in these situations where sometimes you wait, you know, even 20, 30 minutes, where sometimes they're doing rock blasting, which when that happens, they can close the highways for, 30 minutes up to an hour, especially when they're using helicopters and different things. So depending on where you are, or even if there's just rockfall or slides, I mean, this highway sees a lot of crazy shit. And that's why you need to be sharp. So now we have 2 trailers up ahead. Campers. Or a camper and a trailer. There's a construction zone. Usually when it ends, you'll be either at the last cone, and of course there should be a proper sign, unfortunately on the left-hand side facing backwards, to let you know when the construction zone ends. Let's say here. So like I said, this is 1-lane traffic. In this case, there was a traffic control person that was controlling the traffic. No foldable intersection. And we're back. 60 kilometers, recommended speed limit around the curves. So now we got a little bit more traffic ahead of us than earlier. We have 3 vehicles and going downhill, enjoying the views of the Rocky Mountains in British Columbia Highway 3, heading west. If anyone's seen the movie Nope, that cloud up there looks very, very ominous. And if you haven't seen the movie Nope, especially if you're into sci-fi, go check it out. You'll see what I mean. You'll never look at clouds the same way. Now, if you notice, we have a broken line on the left side or inwards, which now it changes back outwards, which that indicates that if you're on that side of the road, you may pass. Okay, as long as it's safe and you have good visibility. This is why a lot of times you will see WO lines in these situations, because there's so many curves and so many blind spots. If you pass someone here, it's usually not going to be good if there's oncoming traffic. Okay, there have been cars here that have fallen off cliffs, and I've seen a lot of very unfortunate and unusual accidents on these roads. And this is before I had the dash cam. So, now see, I'm a little bit too close, right? So don't drive that aggressively. I was just expecting everyone to drive maybe a little bit faster in this case, but people are slowing down. And when you have large vehicles in front of you, that is something that you should anticipate if you are going to be driving defensively. So like I said, I'll be making mistakes here. Some of them are intentional. Some of them are just because I was having fun and, listening to music. As I said, even though I was thinking about having this video or preparing a video about this, but I always try to tell or show people, the good and the bad, mistakes, and we all make mistakes. Try to minimize them as much as possible. So now we're traveling at I think probably around 60 kilometers an hour. We're going uphill. For a lot of trucks, it's going to be tough going uphill, especially if they're heavy and fully loaded. So that's how it happens, right? And if you're not keeping your distance, yeah, you're going to have to use your brakes. That's why you should keep your distance, right? Don't tailgate. Don't try to get too close to vehicles. And if you do, then sit back and give yourself and them a little bit of space. At slower speeds, you can drive closer to someone, technically, because your reaction time is going to be not necessarily faster, but because you're driving slower, you'll be able to react more accordingly. And the main thing is just braking distance, right? That's why you're keeping further away, so that you can react in time, and then your braking distance is increased. So at a higher speed, you just need more space to stop. This is why I see so many rear-enders on the highway, and I've said this before when I made the original highway video, but people just tailgate, and when you're tailgating someone and someone brakes in front of you and you're not aware and anticipating it and not paying attention, bad things will happen. So don't tailgate at specifically at higher speeds. I mean, don't do it at all, but definitely don't do it at higher speeds. But don't do it at all. Ever. Nice curves, nice views. So now I'm probably around, still maybe 70 or 80. Have not increased the speed too much. And in this case, the speed is essentially dictated by those two trucks up ahead. We have a passing lane, so leave everyone behind. Or at least intend to. I prefer to have the slower vehicles behind me. That's just the way I drive. But again, in these situations, you have to be looking for those signs that tell you where you'll be merging, right? Because you don't want to be cutting in front of someone, behind someone. I mean, you don't want to be cutting in front of or behind someone as much as possible, but it's always better to get behind someone as long as there's enough space than in front of someone, at the last second, let's say, generally speaking. So I've passed the vehicle. I'm going to move over to the right side. And we're cruising. Back to 110, 115. 100 kilometer speed limit maximum. Now we have 2-lane highway back on both sides. We still have a very, I almost said wide double yellow line, but it was for a second. So we've just passing the Eastgate community on the left-hand side, and I'm going to get gas. You guys have yourselves a lovely morning or evening or afternoon, wherever you are, and we'll see you in the next video. That's it. Take care. Bye-bye.